So tell us about the not enough mantra and how you derived at that and why you maintain it.
Yeah, it really goes back to my mom. I have to give her credit. My dad was definitely hard worker and the backbone of the family, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she shared with me early on in life, son, there's two worlds, the world you want it to be and the world that is. And the world
Mm,
that is says that you're going to have to do better than just be good. Good just won't be enough. You'll have to be your best. The whole twice as hard to get half as much thing. And
mm.
so third, fourth grade, she hit me with this, hey, good's not enough. And I brought home a report card, Lonnie, and, it was a good report card, but she knew I could do better. And so that's when the whole good is not enough or is not enough theme came on. And so obviously, good is not enough and diversity is not enough. And I'm finding out now retirement is not enough, but that's kind of where the whole mantra and tagline came.
Welcome to the I Learn, Therefore I Can podcast, an iRise performance consulting production where we explore the dynamic world of performance through a learning and development lens with a focus on achieving excellence. I'm your host, Lonney Gregory, and I'm inspired by those of you that wish to be better at what you've been asked to do.
Welcome to another impactful episode of I Learn, Therefore I Can. Today, we're honored to bring you insights from one of the corporate world's most influential voices in change management and leadership, Keith Wyche. If you're looking to understand how to guide organizations through turbulent times while maintaining peak performance, you're in for a treat. Keith Wyche has spent over 30 years at the helm of billion-dollar businesses, leading industries through rapid technological shifts and intense competitive pressures. His track record includes driving transformation at some of America's most iconic corporations like Walmart, AT&T, and SuperValue Foods. As a senior executive and one of the highest-ranking African-American leaders in corporate America, Keith's expertise in restructuring underperforming operations has earned him accolades from top business publications like Black Enterprise and Savoy magazine. But what sets Keith apart is his inside-out approach to leadership, rooted in his 4 R's of change: relevance, readiness, robustness, and responsiveness. In this episode, Keith will dive into these principles and share real-world case studies that show how even small changes in organizational perception can lead to massive shifts in performance. His ability to create cultures of resilience and adaptability has been pivotal in shaping companies ready for the future. Whether it's through talent restructuring, promoting diversity, or aligning teams around shared goals, Keith's strategies maximize profitability, customer satisfaction, and employee engagement. Keith's influence stretches far beyond the boardroom. He's an author of 4 best-selling books and serves on multiple leadership boards, including the Brinks Company, the Executive Leadership Council, and the National Black MBA Association. He's dedicated to fostering workplaces that prioritize connection, collaboration, and innovation, all while driving real bottom-line results. So, grab a notebook and get ready for actionable insights from one of the best in the business, Keith Wyche.
Hello, friends. You heard that introduction, right? I know it's incredible. It was incredible when I was putting it together, when I was researching it. Of course, I knew about Keith Wyche. I read his books. I thought it was required reading growing up. But to have this opportunity to actually have a conversation with Keith, thanks to relationships that I had with others who made the introduction, it's such a fascinating thing to go down this path to understand an individual. So you heard the introduction, and now you're going to meet the man, Mr. Keith Wyche. Keith, thank you so much for joining this podcast. I learned, therefore I can. I really appreciate the time that you're taking to have this conversation with me.
Lonnie, I thank you. The pleasure is all mine. I enjoy the opportunity to share with like minds and to put some thought leadership out there. So again, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Oh man, and like I said, I know you've done this before, but maybe we'll hear something new. In fact, Keith, I do have a question. If you wouldn't mind, would you share something with us that I can't discover from reading, any one of your profiles, your resume, reading any one of your books or any other publications or talks that you have out there, that of course you're willing to share? What can we understand about Keith that we just don't know just yet?
Lonnie, that's a great question. And one of the things that very few people know, except my inner circle, is that by nature, I am an extreme introvert.
Oh my gosh.
People see me on stage or on TV or in dialogues like this, and they think, oh, this guy must be so outgoing and such an extrovert. I am probably the biggest introvert you've ever seen. In fact, I've taken Myers-Briggs probably 5 times, and I'm always an ISTJ. And what I've learned though over my career is I had to overcome that
Mm,
to be successful, because at the end of the day, it's about people and relationships. But I'm the guy who dreads going to the cocktail parties or any situation where there's small talk and chit chat. I suffered through it, but my energy is exhausted. But that's one thing that most people wouldn't know, wouldn't realize.
that is outstanding. I understand perfectly. I'm an INTJ. You and I would probably be neck and neck in that. Um, you know what I appreciate though? I appreciate the fact that you actually know your Myers Briggs type. You can
Yeah,
rattle it off, and you actually know the meaning of I about energy, right?
yeah.
How we consume energy, how we release energy, what wears us out, etc. So, are you a fan of assessments, personality assessments? Have you taken others?
I've taken several. Personalysis is one I've taken. Myers-Briggs, there's several. I'm a fan of them because, similar to 360 evaluation, it gives you multiple perspectives of yourself. So many of us lack self-awareness in how we show up. And, one of the things, Lonnie, I learned as a leader, and I was a young leader, is that everything you do gives a signal, right? And so I use these assessments to be aware of how I may be coming across, how I may be perceived, and also how I can work better with others. So, when I have people who have different makeup than mine on the team, when I have those extroverts, how we can all work together.
Right, and you identify, you call it out with the team. You say, I'm an ISTJ, and what are you? And you understand each other that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
that's powerful. I
And we leverage each other's strengths.
Indeed. Great. Because I'm an advocate for that. So it's refreshing to hear that, particularly from a leader. I've asked questions of leaders before if they knew their type or anything. And I've gotten, well, no, not exactly. So kind of good to hear that from you. Um, so again, friends, you heard in the introduction, Keith is an author. He has 4 books that I'm aware of. It is 4, Keith, or are there more?
It's 4. I'm working on number 5 right now.
All right, outstanding. There are a couple of questions I'd like to ask you about the books. And since you're working on 5, let me just ask this question first. What is your process for saying, I've got something else to say, right? And I need to write this down. How do you go through that decision making process to say, I'm going to commit time, energy, and effort to communicating something I believe in? Walk us through that journey from, having ended a book and then saying, I'm going to do another one. How does that work?
Yeah, Lonnie, I'll even take you back further than that because I had no intention of ever being an author. However, what happened probably in my mid 40s, I lost a very good friend of mine. And on his deathbed, he said, "Hey, Keith, we've done real good in the world. We have these great jobs and big homes and fancy cars." He said, "But I'm about to die, and all of this is going to die with me." He said, "Promise
Mm,
me that you'll find a way to leave a legacy to share this knowledge and share this information." And I'm amazed that when I put that out there, doors opened up. And so I got a book deal with Penguin Press in 2007 and began to work with people like John Maxwell, as well as Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul.
yeah,
And they mentored me and encouraged me, along with several others, to write this book. And so it's really my effort to walk in my purpose. I think there's 2 great days in your life: the day you're born and the day you
they
figure
find
out
out
why.
why.
Don't know where I stole that quote, but I did steal it. But once you lock into your purpose and your passion, it flows. And so each one of these books has been my effort to share what little knowledge I have to the rest of the world, that it might help someone.
Great. So it's all about just fulfilling your purpose. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it really is, particularly this season of my life as a retiree. There's still value. I was talking to a young fellow today that I coach, and he says, "Hey, how about me, taking your torch?" I said, "Well, instead of you taking my torch, why don't I take my torch and light yours, and we can march on together, right? Now you're gonna go a little farther than me, but
right?
I'm still in this race."
How about that? That's great. Let me light your torch. That's really nice. So yeah, about the books. As I was looking them over, because I have one of them. I did notice the not enough theme coming across in three of the four. So tell us about the not enough mantra and how you derived at that and why you maintain it.
Yeah, it really goes back to my mom. I have to give her credit. My dad was definitely hard worker and the backbone of the family, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she shared with me early on in life, son, there's two worlds, the world you want it to be and the world that is. And the world
Mm,
that is says that you're going to have to do better than just be good. Good just won't be enough. You'll have to be your best. The whole twice as hard to get half as much thing. And
mm.
so third, fourth grade, she hit me with this, hey, good's not enough. And I brought home a report card, Lonney, and, it was a good report card, but she knew I could do better. And so that's when the whole good is not enough or is not enough theme came on. And so obviously, good is not enough and diversity is not enough. And I'm finding out now retirement is not enough. But that's kind of where the whole mantra and tagline came from.
Okay, so I could certainly understand the good is not enough as we segue into a little conversation about both change and DEI. I certainly understand the good not being enough if you're trying to be excellent. So not enough, just to come to work and show up.
Sure.
Uh, but what is the diversity is not enough about?
Yeah. And so, as you know, I've been a lifelong advocate of really inclusion. And in my world, uh, inclusion is first and foremost because if we have an inclusive culture, that means everyone is valued, everyone is appreciated, everyone is heard. When you think about the DEI conundrum, diversity, equity, and inclusion, um, the challenge has always been leaning into diversity. And when companies lean into diversity first, if you're not careful, you'll fall into a metrics driven, quota driven, numbers
Right,
driven environment.
right.
I used to serve on the board of the National Black MBA Association, and every year we'd have this, employment conference, career conference, and every year companies would come with their list of, I need three of these, four of these. The problem with that is that if you stop at diversity and you hire me into your company and it's not an inclusive company, I'm not valued, I'm not made to feel appreciated, and they're not equitable, it's a problem. So here's my simple Keith Wyche definition. Diversity says everyone gets invited to dinner. Inclusion says everyone gets a seat at the table where they're welcomed and valued. But equity says everyone gets to order off the same menu of opportunity as others. One of my favorite restaurants is Capitol Grill.
Mm,
And if I took 10 of my associates to Capitol Grill, and let's say five are white males and five are women and people of color, and we go in, equality says we all went into Capitol Grill. But if we get inside and the five white men are allowed to order off the full restaurant menu, and the women and people of color are only offered to eat off the bar menu, which usually only has 15 to 20% of what's on the restaurant menu,
right.
is that really equitable? And so in that scenario, you will come to the dinner hungry and leave hungry if you're not careful. And so I'm a bigger advocate of inclusion. I think it goes down easier. And if you are sincere about inclusion, diversity will come. And so that's kind of where I land on that. And so, a lot of folks, I say, are you doing feel good DNI or real good DNI? Right?
Feel good
You know,
DNI or
uh,
real good DNI.
yeah.
I
So
like
some
that.
folks kind of
Yep.
stop at feel good, right? Let's have some employee resource groups. Let's bring someone in for Black History Month. But are we really digging below the surface to make sure that we have equity across the board?
Right. That phrase that you just coined, I don't know if you just coined it, but it does strike an accord with me. Feel good DNI versus real good DNI. Keith, would it be fair to say that real good DNI may cause others not to feel good? Because I wonder about this onslaught. Why is DNI being has so much attention these days?
Yeah, it's kind of the third rail at this point. I think whenever you have a group of anyone who is used to a certain level of privilege and power, to have to share that feels like I'm taking a loss, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. I also think that there is this subliminal message that somehow someone who falls under the diversity, equity, inclusion banner is less than or is not as competent, which also means there's an assumed competence for the other side.
Exactly.
And so, I really think that's, where a lot of the issues start. But I will still say that if an organization or an individual is serious, they start with inclusion and are sincere about inclusion. Because if you focus on inclusion, you will bring in, by virtue of the fact that there are intelligent women, there are intelligent LGBTQ people, there are intelligent Black and brown people. You will find that those folks will rise along with everyone else. But if you again make that somehow the boogeyman and imply that someone who is a woman or person of color is less than or not as qualified, that's where you get into trouble.
Indeed, indeed. You know what, Keith, the other thing that I wonder about with respect to this conversation and the current environment is to what extent or practitioners, me and you, right? To what extent have we contributed to where we are? And I say that because if we consider it as to be like a system, we're a part of the system. We've always been a part of the system from its inception. We've created a lot of the programs. We've written the books. We've done the training. We've gone from house to house and told a story, some better than others. How much of where we are do we have a count to make?
Yeah, I think we have to be honest and look in the mirror. And I've seen a couple different models of DEI practitioners: the burnout versus the sellout. The burnout is the
Mm,
person who takes the role, maybe not realizing that they don't have the adequate resources, haven't been given the adequate headcount, and yet they're asked to raise the sick, heal the dead, and feed 5,000, and they tend to burn out. They realize they have really no real juice in the organization. They can't get programs across. They were really figureheads, and those folks burn out. Then you have the sellout crowd, and fortunately, there's not too many of these, but those are the folks who they get this role and they really don't want to push the envelope or really push the initiatives. They want to do what the company finds comfortable.
right.
Maybe they'll start some ERPs and for diversity days, but they really won't push the agenda. They won't ask the question. For example, hey, when we look at our population, I know we said 20% of it is people of color, but let's break that down, what people of color means. And oh, by the way, at what levels does that? And so those are the tough questions that somehow some of the folks in those spaces either aren't comfortable asking or don't want to ask for fear of losing their seat at the table.
Right. Indeed. Everyone's got something at stake, I think. I am curious, though, given where we are, what do you think the future of DEI is? Where is it going?
Yeah, I think, if we look at the facts, the U.S. Census will tell us that by 2040, we will have, for the most part, a minority majority country. And so when you think about, just, the look of that, we will be a diverse nation, a diverse country. And so we'll have to reckon with that, right? At some point. I do think that, the language might change. I think, the SHRM last week, took equity out of their definition in their movement. So they're focusing primarily on inclusion and diversity.
Mm,
There are other organizations who grab this word belonging and they're focused on that. And while I get belonging, my pushback to the belongers are belonging is an outcome. And you get that outcome. I feel like I belong in this organization if I'm included, if
included.
I'm valued, if I'm appreciated, if I'm, given an equitable opportunity. And so I think it will not go away. I think that it will morph into maybe something else. Maybe they'll lead with inclusion and
Mm,
focus more on that. But it can't help but be something that goes forward because the demographics of this country demand it.
indeed, it does. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with Dr. Adrian Carter, Carter Development Group out of South Florida. And he starts out, well, the clip that I captured is when we were talking about the letters, the alphabet soup, and he made a little bit of a joke about it. He has DEIABCDEFGHI, right? He says the letters don't matter. Here's what we're really trying to accomplish. I grew up, and maybe I'm stuck, and please share with me if you believe that I am. I grew up that the letters were significant, that they meant something, that they were contextual, and they evolved to understand why we needed certain things. Like we know we started addressing diversity because of the civil rights era and those types of things. We understood that we needed to focus on inclusion because just getting people in the door wasn't enough, right? If you're not being included. My research tells me that belonging did enter the conversation at that point, followed by accessibility. Although accessibility has its roots in some of the civil rights laws or the accessibility laws, the ADA later on, and then equity, and now like social justice. I'm wondering, what is your opinion about the letters? Like, do we need the letters, or can we just cover these ideas without letters and perhaps reduce some of the tension that we're experiencing?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that, words matter. And these letters represent words, right?
Indeed.
And so, to me, accessibility matters, equity matters, inclusion matters. And they also matter because absent of them, pre-civil rights movement, what did we have? And so, if we are naive enough to think that left to our own devices, that we would be inclusive, that we would be equitable, that we would be diverse, history proves otherwise, right? And so I think it's important that, those of us who believe in inclusion, equity, that we maintain and that we still fight the good fight. Understand that we live in this post-truth environment many times,
Mm,
but the reality of it is that truth are truth and facts are facts. And so, and it's about opportunity. Again, it's not about, me giving my cousin Ray Ray a job, because he's my cousin and he's black, is, hey, this person, he's qualified. He's done the work, or she's done the work. And so, again, I go back to my crazy analogy, make sure that if, I'm qualified, I'm there, that I get to eat off the same menu of opportunity as everybody else.
right, right. So Keith, we know that you have been prolific in helping organizations establish DEI programs, programming, speaking to CEOs, learning leaders, etc. Now, though, in your current retirement isn't good enough place, and you're not actively building DEI programming, I'm pretty sure you're still having conversations with leaders across the globe. What types of things are they asking you? What types of things are you telling them?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. They're asking some good questions. And what I mean by that is that many of them saying, hey, Keith, I do not want to abandon the DEI work. I understand, since the Supreme Court ruling on DEI as it pertains to education, that we're under a lot more scrutiny, either through the board or investors or those types of groups. So how can I continue this fight and continue to do the right thing in this climate? And those are the things that they're asking about. And my answer is just be more intentional and deliberate about what you do. Right? Maybe you can't fund 15 different projects, but let's find the meaningful ones that move the needle. Let's find the big rocks and get behind those and support those. Let's lean into inclusion and really understand what that means and what that looks like. And the other thing I always add is there has to be some motivation, be it financial or otherwise, accountability for your senior leaders and your mid leaders to
Mm,
make sure that this is a part of your culture. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to have their bonus tied to some type of metric, but it could be something as simple as quarterly reviews. Talk about what you're doing to be more inclusive in your hiring. Talk about what you're doing to be more inclusive in your development of talent. Just having those conversations and knowing that as a leader, I have to present on those conversations will change the behavior.
indeed. I noticed even in the last several conversations I've had on this topic, folks aren't talking about the business case for diversity anymore. The ROI, the proven studies. Again, this has been going on for decades. So are we past the business case? We no longer have to preach the business case for DEI types efforts, and just focus on the intentionality of making it work for everybody. No longer have to say you're going to make more money.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the business case is that, numbers can be manipulated, numbers can lie, and numbers can be exaggerated. And so I think that there were times when, people wanted this hard, fast business case. Well, there isn't always really a hard, fast business case, right? And so what I lean into is, hey, at the end of the day, your organization, you want to attract the top talent in the marketplace, regardless of what it looks like, correct? Yes. In that the case, you have to understand that you have to be more diverse. My grandfather had a third grade education, but he told me, he says, grandson, if you fish in a pond that only has catfish, you're going to pull up catfish every time. And so for me, it's helping these companies expand where they look at, where they recruit, who they recruit for. That's what I wrote, Diversity is Not Enough, to help those organizations who say, I can't find a woman, I can't find a person of color, I can't find a black. Here are the places you can go. So that's really, my stance on that.
That's great. Yeah, I stopped talking about the business case a long time ago because it's either you believe it or not, and if you don't believe it, thanks for inviting me over, right?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah, but
done.
what confirmation bias kicks in, and you find those facts and you cherry pick the things that support what you want to say, pro or con. And so let's move away from that discussion and let's talk about a discussion that's meaningful, and that's human capital, because you have to have people if you're going to be successful going forward. And so you want to be that employer of choice for a lot of this talent in the marketplace.
Outstanding. Keith, before I change topics on you, because we got to go to change because you're a big change transformation agent. I appreciate the whole change domain. The other book that you have, Corner Office Rules, doesn't say anything about enough or good enough. 10 Realities of Executive Life. Certainly, I'm sure that's full of just a lot of your experiences, perhaps some nice, some not so nice. Uh, Out of these 10 realities, which ones just resonate with you the most, and the ones that well, not like me, but people who aspire to be executives, which ones should they pay attention to?
I'll make it real simple, and that is what I call, you can call it change, you can call it transformation, you can call it disruption. But understanding that in today's marketplace, in today's world economy, transformation, change, and disruption are a way of life. It is no more the once every blue moon, some new idea comes up. It is almost constantly, monthly. There is something that is happening to disrupt your industry, to disrupt your supply chain. I mean, you think about Chat GPT and other generative GPT, they will actually change the way we do business, right? And so to be a leader, you have to be someone who embraces, understands, and can maneuver through change and transformation, which for many of us, because by nature we're change averse. And so, we have to really work that muscle to make it happen. But if you don't, history is littered with companies that did not make that transformation. You think about the companies that were around. I talked to folks that in 1979, I worked for the number one retailer in the world. And people go, who's that? I said, Sears Roebuck and Company. Where are they now?
Right.
Right. And what's tragic is Sears was really a combination of Walmart and Amazon together, because in addition to their brick and mortar, they had this catalog
They had
business,
the
right?
catalog. That's right.
Exactly. You think about Blockbuster and what happened there. And so, again, understand that you have, and what change means, you have to be a continuous learner. You have to stay current to remain relevant. And you can never rest on your laurels because things are always moving and shifting around you.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for that segue, being a continuous learner. So, Keith, in keeping with the theme of the show, I learn, therefore I can. I'm really curious to understand what is that thing that you decidedly and intentionally wanted to learn, needed to learn, went and learned so that you could go do something, right? I learned this, therefore I can do that. What was that thing for you?
For me, that thing was to be, for lack of better terms, self-aware, and to be a coach. Because to me, it was all about people. And so I figured out early on that my success was not just my success. That I had to make the people around me successful, the people above me successful. And so I focused and leaned into my people skills. I
Mm,
leaned into being aware of who I am, first of all, and what I bring to the table, my strengths and my lesser strengths. But I also studied human behavior. I studied sociology. I studied organizational development, organizational design, to see how all these pieces fit together in this puzzle. and has really helped me tremendously in my ascent during my time in corporate America. Because I did not have this myopic view. I had a much more holistic, wider lens to look at when I looked at an organization and its people. And so that was kind of my secret sauce, which is hard for an introvert to do. But I made myself do it because at the end of the day, it's about people. I don't care what business you're in. Yeah, you may sell things and you think you're a retailer. You're really in the people business. You just happen to sell
Exactly.
stuff. If you're a
Exactly.
bank, you're really not in the banking industry. You're really in the people business. You just use banking. I mean, and so that's the secret sauce for me.
Right. Although I would add, though, as an introvert, uh, I would enjoy just learning and not necessarily have to say anything about it. But I'm an introvert in the learning space, so I extrovert my learning. Right.
There you
I
go.
extrovert what I learn. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So you learned about self first. You
Yes.
learned about others. You learned about like systems so that you could be more effective in
Yes.
working with others and promote the fact that no matter what industry or what business you're in the people business.
Yeah. And not only are you in the people business, but you have transferable skills. People often ask me, Keith, how did you go from being president of Pitney Bowes to president of a grocery store chain with no grocery experience? Hell, I didn't even buy groceries, right? But what I realized, there were some transferable skills that applied that were really, agnostic relative to industry, right? So at Pitney Bowes, I was worried about client retention, saving my top clients. Well, in grocery retail, it was customer retention, right?
Right.
At Pitney Bowes, I ran a distributed workforce. Well, in retail, I had a distributed workforce because there were multiple stores. And so being able to connect those dots and to really say, hey, these skills are transferable regardless of industry was also a great learning.
Outstanding. Yeah, transferable skills. I think we all grow up understanding that that is a thing that we could capitalize on it. Do you think people don't take as much advantage of the fact that they have transferable skills? What do you think people are doing with knowing that or not knowing that?
I think that it's really an issue of the fact that from birth we're used to being labeled. I'm an accountant. I'm a banker. I'm a retailer. I'm
Right.
this. I'm that, and that's what you do. That's not who you are. And so I went through a lot of exercises to say, okay, tell me about a time when I did this, that, and the other, and I would take whatever role I had and I'd say, okay, what problems did I inherit in that role? What did I do to address those problems? And what was the outcome? And
Right.
by doing that, I was able to talk about myself not from a industry perspective, but from a skills perspective of what I could bring to the table, regardless of industry. And so, it takes time, it takes effort to do that. But too often, we're taught to be a label, right? I'm a
Yeah,
banker, I'm a retailer. We're really much more than that.
we are. We are indeed. We're a multiplicity of things every day, and sometimes we change roles, we change hats every day as
Absolutely.
well. So that brings us to the part where I'd like to talk about change, right? Because that's my jam. I know it's your jam, right? Because it's true, change is the constant in life. It's the thing I believe, like you do, that executives have to be better at understanding change and be prepared for transformation. What is your major philosophy around change, and is it developed from some of the great change thinkers over the years?
Yeah, for me, it was developed subliminally through my career path. And so I started with the Bell system in 1981 prior to the divestiture when they broke it up. So I got to go from a monopoly to a competitive entity. I left there and I went to IBM when it was transforming from a hardware and software company to a services and solution company. I went back to the Bell system when they were getting away from yellow pages and payphones to cellular and paging. I come to retail when they're getting away from brick and mortar, going to more of an e-commerce omni-channel. And so, my whole career inadvertently has been around change. At Pitney Bowes, when they were going from postage meeting machines, I don't know how many letters you mail now, but to again more services solution. And so, for me, there's a few things. One, there has to be a very clear platform or reason for change. What's that burning platform? Why do we change, and what happens if we don't?
Right.
Right? And everyone needs to be clear on what that is. Secondly, we need to identify what the end goal is. What are we trying to become? What is it we're trying to do? In the case of Walmart, it was to move away from a brick and mortar retailer to an omni-channel retailer where the shopper can shop when they want, where they want, how they want. From there, everyone needs to understand their role and how they fit into this new vision,
Right.
right? From the cashier to the stockroom person to the truck driver, how does my role impact this ultimate vision of what we want to be? And then we have to over communicate and constantly communicate where we are in this process, checkpoints along the way, and not be afraid at the appropriate time to do a redo and step back and do some
Mm,
course correction. But where a lot of companies miss the boat is two things. One, not making sure there's alignment on the vision so people understand here's why we have to change.
right.
My talking point at Walmart was we don't want to be the next Sears. That was the burning platform. We want to change, right? Now, here's what we're changing to, and here's where you fit into that vision. And I have found, Lonney, that when people understand the vision, understand why change is important, understand where they fit in, they tend to engage more and they tend to wrap their arms around it. You may never get 100% agreement, but you can get alignment.
Gotcha. All right. So you don't walk around with the ad car model in your pocket or Cotter's model in
No,
your pocket.
I'm not that bright. I leave that for you smart guys, man.
Right. So and again, all of these models say pretty much the same things that you do. I think people are interested. Certainly, I appreciate models and constructs because they help guide my thinking
Absolutely.
and put together things. But there are folks that are hardcore, right? They're like, I side with this guy, I side with that lady. I'm a this practitioner. Versus, here's how I think about something holistically with respect to change and transformation. That seems to be your approach.
That's my approach, and it's really a knowledge-based approach that I believe that if people have the information and the facts, uh, they will see the logic in what it is that we're trying to do. You can't implement change without going down to the bowels of the organization where everyone understands the
There you
impact.
go.
You can't have change if there's no understanding as to why and what will happen if we don't. And we have just too many examples that we can share. Hey, when you don't change, here is what happens. You'll be the next, you name the company, right? But again, I look to guys like you to bring the models and the expertise on how to manage that at grassroots level. But as a leader, it's just making sure that you're creating that vision, explaining the vision, and repeating it over and over. It
Over
can't
and
be a
over
one and
again.
done message, right?
That's it. Yeah, man. So, Keith, as we were teeing it up about change a little earlier on, you mentioned something. You said most people are resistant to change.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
We're just most people don't like to operate outside of their comfort zone, and that's in every aspect of
Yeah.
life. I've been to cities. I lived in New York. There were folks who never left their borough. There were, and so by nature, change it's disrupting. It's uncomfortable, right? Uh, but it's through change that caterpillar becomes a butterfly, right? And so it's one of those things where I think as a people, particularly think about the last 25 years, it's a constant. And so I think when I look at my grandchildren, for example, uh, change is a way of life for them, you
Yeah.
know. And I tease them, my oldest grandson's in high school. And I said, when I was in college and high school, there was no computer, there was no internet. So, oh, wow, really, Grant? But it
Right. How did you
changes.
do that? How did you
Yeah, how
survive?
did you do anything? But I think that they're a brilliant generation. They're inquisitive, and I think that they get the memo. Uh, where some of us boomers, I'm a boomer, we kind of came kicking and screaming.
We are. It's interesting. It reminds me of a story that I tell all the time. After we started the recovery after 9/11, and the airlines and everything was opened up again. TSA had taken over. I had done a couple of trips having to now strip just about, right. And I remember taking my youngest on a trip. And of course, I'm hollering, not hollering, but I'm complaining. I got to take off all of these clothes. And she's like, "Oh, daddy, we're here." And she's taking everything off. And she's happy to take off stuff because she doesn't know any different, right?
Right,
This was
right.
a new reality to her. It's normal. And she's wondering why I'm so upset when I have to sit down, put my shoes on, and my belt back on. Um, but what I'm interested in your opinion, is change just something that perhaps generations of folks see differently, or is it just systemic? Everyone is just wants to be in their zone, and if they're not comfortable, then they're resistant, or is it a generational thing?
I think it's more of a generational thing, not just for the sake of generation, but just thinking about how we've gone from an agricultural society that my
Right,
grandfather grew up to kind of that manufacturing blue collar facility society that my father was a part of. While there was change in technology during those years, it was not to the magnitude that we've seen in the last 20, 25 years, right? And so, my children, and to a great extent, my grandchildren, that's all they know is change, right?
exactly.
I can show my grandkids a home phone and they won't know what that is. Show them a payphone if you can find one. They won't know what that is. But my 3-year-old can program my TV and my VC, not my VCR, my Bluetooth and,
Right,
and so I think because they grew up with change, they grew up with technology, where I grew up with an Etch a Sketch.
right.
I think it's just second nature to them that it is to our generation.
I'm wondering how many folks listening to this are gonna go Etch a Sketch. What's that?
It's true, right?
I remember those too, man. Just plain old fashioned fun. Plain old fashioned fun. Thank you about the change thing. So I would suspect then that you would advocate that leaders learn how to deal with change, learn how to deal with transformation. Would you consider it like a set of competencies, like change related competencies? What do you propose leaders actually physically do to get their acts together with respect to change?
Yeah, I'm already seeing it. I serve a corporate board and another nonprofit board, and these folks, are my age and some older. They are embracing these new technologies. They are studying change and transformation. I know some CEOs who are going to Harvard and some other places taking, CEU extracurricular courses on change and transformation, studying Harvard Business Review cases, and so. I think that, again, the recent history shows that, it's kind of change or die. And so they are beginning to embrace, hey, this business model we have today is not going to be the business model we have 5 years from now. You can
Right.
go back and, early in our careers, long-term planning, was, way down the line and let's do 3 to 5 year plans. Well, now they're almost doing 18 months to 3 months because, again, depending on the industry, that change is just so rampant. And so I just think it's part of the DNA of the role of a leader now to embrace that change. I think staying current to remain relevant is significant. I told all my friends, hey, subscribe, get a subscription to Chat GPT, whether you want to or not, and play around
Right.
with it. It's not going anywhere, right?
It's not going
Uh,
anywhere. That's right.
and if my 86-year-old grandmother can, use a smartphone, mother can use a smartphone at her age, then we can learn some of this newest technology.
Yeah. So you did mention something just now, kind of fascinating. I do recall those 3 to 5 year strategic planning sessions, right? Where I would facilitate, what does life look like 5 years from now? You just said we need to cut that down to almost 18 months. Is that what you're sharing with your clientels, or do you believe that's just where it's going? That's what we need to do.
Well, I think two things can be true. I think that you still need to do that 3 to 5 year plan, what have you, but you also need to have steps in between that where you're looking at that maybe annually to say, okay, do we need to course correct? Did
Gotcha.
something change in the industry? The old SWOT analysis. Did something happen? Is there a shift? Geopolitical. We are much more in a global economy now than we were 40 years ago when I started working. And so, is there something happening in China? Is there something happening in Russia, the BRIC company? So, making sure that, all eyes are open and eyes wide, shut on what's really going on all around us.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna have to take a note. I've got a 3 year plan. I think I might shorten it down to 18 months real quick.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that. Keith, there is something I noticed on your website. It was really cool. It was talking about like what you do, keynote addresses, fireside chats, and panels.
Yes.
Right? Like just three things, three cool things. Didn't sound terribly exciting, other than your keynote addresses. I've seen those. But three very simple things. Um, do you have a favorite? Right? Do you prefer doing keynotes over just having a fireside chat, or do you say, yeah, I'll do a panel, but you have to pay me more?
Well, actually, the presentation by myself is the highest cost ticket. But no, my favorite, believe it or not, is a fireside chat. Very similar to what you and I are doing, where I sit across from someone and we just chop it up and we talk and we share real time. That I enjoy. And my second would be panels, because panels provide a diversity of opinions and thoughts, right? And so it's not just the gospel according to Keith Wyche. It's Keith, it's Lonney, it's Derek, it's whoever it is. And so those are my two favorite. Actually, my least favorite, quite honestly, is just to stand up and to present flat-footed. I can do it. I love to do it. Come from a long line of Baptist preachers, but I love the interaction with other people and the engagement with a panel and with a fireside chat.
Yeah, and then as an introvert, when it's done, you go take a nap, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always that moment when you're on the stage and you just present it and they rush the stage and everybody wants to talk to you. And it's like,
I
but
know.
I work through that.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
take my
We all
medicine
do.
and I work through.
We all do. I do have another question, and this is the question that basically says, well, let's put it this way: folks are going to read your books, they're going to watch your YouTubes, they're going to, if they want you, they're going to identify who's this guy Keith Wyche they haven't already heard about you. I think if they're watching this, they'll do that. I've certainly looked at your profiles and videos and all of that stuff. I'm sure though that there is something in all of your conversations you just can't get to, right? Either I don't ask, or it didn't come up, or you go like, I forgot to say this, right? Um, what is it that you can share with us that we just didn't get around to, or I didn't ask, that you really think is important for people to know? And when I say people, like people in the learning and development space, like myself, who go into organizations and try to help them do what they're asking others to do, other consultants, or those leaders that you've been growing all of your career. What are those things that you just want to say to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to me, it revolves around two things: entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And
Mm,
let me unpack that. Growing up as a child of the 60s, my parents beat it in my head. You go to college, you get that good job, you work 30, 40 years, you get the gold watch, and, you retire happily. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, when I look about, the community of which you and I come from, we may be the world's biggest consumers, but we manufacture, create, and own very little. And so one of the things I love to talk about is being either an entrepreneur, where you go out and set up shop, what have you, or be what I call an entrepreneur. And that's that you work in this corporate environment long enough to learn these skills, to learn your value, and the money that you now make for that company, you hang your own shingle out and make that for yourself. When I think about generational wealth and passing it down, not saying you can't become wealthy or rich working in corporate America. We see CEOs, make 23x, more than their associates. But there's very few of those positions. And so I love the fact that a lot of our younger folks, these millennials and Zs and Ys, have more of an entrepreneurial slant.
mm,
A, B, they also are more, likely to work 3 to 5 years someplace, if that long,
right.
before they move and go somewhere else and ultimately hang out their own shingle. And so, while we didn't talk in detail, there are times I'm a little reluctant to encourage someone to go fight that corporate battle, because I know what's ahead of them.
Right.
Now, if you want to fight it, I can help you fight it. I can coach you and mentor you to do it. But there's also this door, the other door over here, that's entrepreneurship, that might be something that'd be interesting. So, it's not a direct answer to your question, but that's one of
No,
those
that
things that,
is.
I'm more an advocate of now than I was in my career.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I gave an apology to my three children after they were grown and out and been to college. I apologized 'cause I told them the same things that we were told: go to college to get that job. What I realized was you actually go to college to learn how to think.
Exactly.
And once you understand how to think, you can do whatever you want to. But I was the promoting, get a job, cut your hair, right? Put on the
Hmm.
tie, the suit, right? Do that corporate or government or military thing. And I later apologized to them for almost forcing them down a path that didn't necessarily suit them. But they're all settled in now. But I appreciate the fact that we can now introduce to folks that we care about. There's more than just going to school, period,
Yep.
to go get a job, period. But that learning is important. And you already talked about being a lifelong learner. So we appreciate that. Got one more question for you, Keith. That's all right. Well, actually,
One
two.
more. All right. All right.
Okay. Next question is, if you could ask and answer your own question, right? Like in that reflective moments, we all have reflective moments, and we ask ourselves, well, how did I do today? Or what do I need to do tomorrow? Or what should I be thinking about? If you could ask and answer your own question, what would that be right now?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question, Lonnie. And I think I would ask this intriguing question. Keith, you're now on the other side of your career. You did 40 plus years in corporate America. What would you do differently would be the
Mm,
question. And the answer would be I would have spent more quality time with my children doing things that mattered to them. So, for example, I can remember missing a father-daughter dance because I felt I just had to fly out to this presentation somewhere. I missed going to my son's senior night when he walked out on the basketball court,
mm,
that last time because I went, and these were pivotal moments in their life that I couldn't get back. And we talked about it, Lonnie, when I retired. And the funny thing is when they kind of hit me with it at first, I said, wait a minute, you guys, I got you those Jordans, you got a new car, and they said, Dad, don't get us wrong. We appreciate the stuff. We like the stuff. We wish we could have had more of you.
right.
And so when I talk to the young professionals that I'm mentoring or coaching, I kind of put that bug in their ear that, life comes at you fast. You only get one time to raise your children. We got to provide and put a roof over their heads and what have you. But there are moments in life that matter, that are pivotal, and don't miss those moments if you can.
Wow. Thanks for that reminder, man. That's what's up.
I'm a much better grandfather than I was father.
It's true. My two daughters are bookends. So they're 12, 14 years apart. They're bookends. The oldest daughter said to the youngest daughter one day, "What have you done to my father?" Right? Because they all have different experiences. My oldest daughter,
Absolutely.
all she ever heard was no. I was an E2 in the Navy when she was born.
Oh man,
Yeah,
poor
all
girl.
she ever heard was no. My son was in the middle, so we negotiated. Baby girl grew up with a corporate executive in a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. She never heard the word no.
Absolutely. And what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, I can appreciate that. So actually, the last question is, Keith, later on we'll probably introduce some other topics that are worthy of deep conversation and perspective taken. You mind if I invite you back to have a conversation with some other folks since you like the panel discussions?
Oh, I would love it, Lonnie. I consider it an honor. And you are helping me again fulfill my purpose and my passion in life. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh man, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Wyche. This is our second conversation, right? We talked a little while early on. I want to give a big shout out to my friend, mentor, and coach, Ted Imes, who got us together to introduce us. Thank you, Ted. Really appreciate you. And that's how relationships and friendships are built. And that's how we learn, by connecting with one another. So, Keith, I really appreciate you taking the time, man, and spending this time with me and the folks that are listening.
Hey,
Thanks
well,
so
you
much.
made it so easy, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. That concludes this episode of I Learn, Therefore I Can, an iRise Consulting Performance podcast. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling better about being better at what I was asked to do. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. And thanks for learning. Because learning matters and performance counts. Be well.